They taught you to explain yourself, to justify your decisions, to soften your tone, to give reasons for your boundaries. They taught you to defend your choices like a defendant in court. They trained you to seek permission in silence. Approval in advance. Understanding before action. And you believed this. You believed that if you explained yourself enough, people would respect you. You believed that clarity would earn kindness. You believed that justification would earn acceptance. But here is the truth you learn only after the world wounds you a few times. The more you explain yourself, the more people feel entitled to your reasons. The more you justify, the more they question. The more you defend, the more they attack. Because explanation is not communication. Explanation is exposure. It reveals your doubts. It reveals your fears. It reveals the small openings through which people can reach in and control you. And so the truth stands quietly in the background. A truth so powerful that most people never dare to speak it. The day you stop explaining yourself, you become dangerous. Not violent, not cruel. Dangerous in the sense that you become unpredictable, uncontrollable, unmanipulable. A person who moves without announcing their every step cannot be slowed. A person who decides without waiting for applause cannot be steered. A person who stands by their convictions without seeking permission becomes someone others must respect, even if they never admit it. People are comfortable with you when they know your entire reasoning, when they have access to your insecurities, when they can use your justification against you, when every decision you make is placed before them like an offering. But the moment you make choices without explaining them, the moment you walk away without a speech, the moment you say no without a paragraph, something shifts. They feel the loss of control, and that loss frightens them. Most people are not afraid of your actions. They are afraid of your independence. They are not intimidated by your choices. They are intimidated by the fact you no longer seek validation before making them. When you stop explaining yourself, you reclaim all the power you gave away in hesitation, in apology, in justification. You begin to see something clearly. The people who truly respect you never required an explanation. The people who loved you never demanded one. The people who understood you did so without needing your essays, your excuses, your emotional reports. You see that the ones who demanded explanations were often the ones who benefited from your uncertainty. Machiavelli understood this. He wrote that men judge more by eyes than intellect, because everyone sees your actions. Few understand your reasons. And those who do not understand your reasons often twist them. They interpret them through their own insecurity, their own fear, their own ego, their own desires. This is why explaining yourself is a trap. You give people the raw materials to create a version of you that suits their narrative, not your truth. Nietzsche warned of another danger. He said that to live authentically is to stand alone. To act from your inner strength is to invite misunderstanding. When you stop explaining yourself, you stop begging people to understand you. And when you stop begging, you stop kneeling. Nietzsche believed that power begins where explanation ends. Because explanation is often an attempt to make yourself small enough to fit inside someone else's comfort. Marcus Aurelius practiced silence not as avoidance, but as sovereignty. He understood that your peace depends on controlling what you allow into your mind. He said that you should never tie your inner state to the opinions of others, An explanation is exactly that. A tying, a fastening, a surrender of your internal authority to the external noise of approval. Epictetus taught that a free person acts, an unfree person explains, a free person chooses, an unfree person defends, a free person moves, an unfree person justifies. Freedom is not the absence of responsibility. It is the presence of inner clarity that does not need permission to live according to itself. Every time you explained yourself, you were asking for permission in disguise. You were hoping your reasons would soften the blow. You were hoping they would make someone stay. You were hoping they would make someone respect you. But respect is not born from explanation. Respect is born from consistency, from conviction, from the quiet posture of someone who has decided and does not need to narrate their decision. People test you. They test you not because they are curious, but because they want to see if your conviction is solid or soft, if your no is a real no or an invitation to negotiate, if your boundaries are written in stone or in sand. Explanation is the moment they learn your weak points. It is the moment they sense hesitation. It is the moment they realize they can push you. But the one who does not explain is the one they cannot predict. And unpredictability is power. Think about the strongest leaders in history. Think about the most respected figures. They spoke rarely. They justified rarely. They acted. They moved. They walked away. They did not sit down and write essays about their choices. Their silence was not coldness. It was clarity. It was confidence. When you stop explaining yourself, you stop giving people a map of your internal world. You stop giving them the levers to pull. You stop handing them the blueprint of your intention. You become something new, something rare, something the world is not comfortable with. A person who relies on their own judgment. And here is the irony. The moment you stop explaining yourself, people start trying to explain you. They become obsessed with why you did what you did. They discuss you behind closed doors. They analyze you. They whisper about you. Because the absence of explanation forces them to confront the reality that they do not control you. The moment they do not know your reasons, they fear your motives. They respect your moves. They hesitate before challenging you. They think twice before speaking against you. Animals do not fear noise. They fear silence. Opponents do not fear the loud one. They fear the quiet one. Weak people do not fear the emotional one. They fear the person who moves without loud emotion. The person who decides without panic. The person who is calm when others are chaotic. There is a reason the most dangerous storms make no sound. And you become such a storm the moment you stop explaining yourself. You begin to see how much strength you wasted trying to make others comfortable. You begin to see how much energy you lost trying to convince people who had already decided not to understand you. You begin to see how much of your life was spent defending choices that were no one's business. You start taking your life back piece by piece. When you stop explaining, you begin acting. When you stop defending, you begin choosing. When you stop justifying, you begin moving. When you stop seeking understanding, you begin seeking truth. And truth does not need an audience. There comes a moment in every powerful life when you realize that your explanations were never the problem. The people you were explaining yourself to were. Because the ones who demanded explanations were often the ones who benefited from doubting you. They needed you to remain uncertain. They needed you to keep talking, keep defending, keep softening. They needed you to stay small enough to control. And the moment you stop explaining yourself, you outgrow their control. You notice it first in small things. Someone asks why you are quiet today. Instead of giving them a long speech about your mood, about your thoughts, about your energy, you simply say that you are fine. And you move on. They feel it, a shift, a barrier, a boundary they can no longer melt. Then it grows. Someone asks why you made a decision. Before, you would have given them a long story. Now you simply say, because I chose to. And you leave it at that. They expect more. They wait for the justification. They look for the hesitation. But you offer none. And in that silence, they feel something they haven't felt from you before. Distance, independence, power. There is something almost magnetic about a person who moves without explaining. People lean in closer. They want to understand. They want to decipher you. They want to know what you think. Because the moment you stop revealing everything, your value rises. What is rare becomes respected. What is hidden becomes studied. What is silent becomes powerful. And that is why stillness scares people more than anger. This is why silence cuts deeper than shouting. This is why walking away without a speech leaves a wound no explanation ever could. Because explanation is an equalizer. It makes you appear accessible. It makes you appear ordinary. It makes you appear uncertain. But silence creates distance. Silence creates depth. Silence creates legend. There is a reason ancient leaders spoke in short sentences. A reason their words survive centuries. They never wasted breath. They never revealed their entire heart. They never opened the full map of their motives. Their silence created space for myth. And myth creates power. Marcus Aurelius wrote that you should rarely be seen complaining and almost never be seen explaining. He believed that inner strength expresses itself through calm decisions, not endless debates. He knew that the moment you begin to defend yourself, you place your reputation in someone else's hands. Schopenhauer said that the more you explain, the more you reveal your need to be understood, and that need weakens your position. Desperation for understanding is a quiet form of self-betrayal. You give others the weapon with which they can stab your confidence. The ancient Stoics knew the secret. Protect your inner world like a fortress. Explanation opens the gates. Silence keeps the walls intact. When you stop explaining, you stop inviting others into the rooms where your doubts sleep. There is a strength in you that cannot grow while you explain yourself. A strength that needs solitude. A strength that needs certainty. A strength that needs the courage to act without waiting for applause, pity, permission, or praise. Think of every moment you were misunderstood. Think of how much of your life has been wasted attempting to correct false narratives. Trying to control how others see you. Trying to persuade people who have never been capable of seeing you clearly. Explanation is a battle with ghosts. You fight for clarity that others have no intention of giving you. You exhaust yourself trying to fix thoughts that were never yours to fix. But what happens when you stop fighting? When you stop chasing understanding? When you stop defending your intentions? You begin to feel light. You begin to feel free. You begin to feel untouchable. In that silence, your thoughts sharpen. Your presence strengthens. Your self-concept solidifies. You begin to move like someone who knows the direction without consulting the crowd. When you stop explaining, you begin protecting your time. You begin protecting your energy. You begin protecting the parts of you that were never meant to be dissected by casual observers. And here is the quiet truth most never learn. Explanation is a craving. You crave understanding. You crave recognition. You crave approval. You crave harmony. But you cannot build a powerful life while craving anything that lives in another person's mind. Power begins the day you stop caring whether they understand you. Power begins the day you stop requiring agreement to act. Power begins the day you stop rehearsing speeches in your head. Power begins the day you detach your self-worth from other people's interpretations. The moment you stop explaining yourself, people start adjusting themselves around you. The moment you stop explaining yourself, conversations shorten. Games end. Manipulation dies. The moment you stop explaining yourself, you become someone who is respected by default, even by those who dislike you, even by those who misunderstand you, even by those who envy you, because clarity frightens the insecure, and independence frightens the controlling, and silence frightens those who used to feed on your words. The less you say, the more they notice. The less you share, the more they wonder. The less you explain, the more they respect what you decide. People will accuse you of being cold. They will say you've changed. They will say you are distant. They will say you are difficult. But what they truly mean is that you have stopped performing for them. You have stopped making yourself emotionally available for their comfort. You have stopped allowing them access to your internal world. And when you stop explaining yourself, something else happens. You realize that the people who belong in your life never needed explanations to begin with. They understood your choices through your actions. They respected your boundaries without needing a presentation. They supported your decisions, even when they did not fully understand them. Because real connection is silent. It is not built through justification. It is built through alignment. You start living without fear. You start acting without hesitation. You start moving without announcing. You start embracing your own authority. You start choosing based on internal truth rather than external pressure. There will be people who cannot handle this version of you. People who depended on your explanations to feel in control. People who needed your words to manipulate outcomes. People who relied on your guilt to shape your choices. You must let them fall away. Machiavelli said that a leader must learn to act without the burden of pleasing everyone. He knew that explanation ties a ruler to the public in ways that weaken his ability to act decisively. Nietzsche said that to become who you are, you must be willing to be misunderstood. That greatness cannot explain itself to small minds. Marcus Aurelius said that your life is yours. Your mind is yours. Your decisions are yours. Explain them to no one unless necessary. And Epictetus said that freedom begins the moment you take responsibility for your choices without asking anyone to approve them. You are not meant to be a spokesperson for your soul. You are meant to live it. And the moment you stop explaining yourself is the moment you stop betraying yourself. You do not owe anyone clarity about your timing. You do not owe anyone justification for your boundaries. You do not owe anyone a speech for your silence. You do not owe anyone a reason for your distance. You do not owe anyone an explanation for your dreams. You do not owe anyone your emotional transparency. Your life is not a court case. Your choices are not evidence. Your boundaries are not negotiable. Your path is not a debate. Your soul is not a democracy. You stop explaining yourself. You become dangerous. You become someone who cannot be manipulated. Someone who cannot be guilt-tripped. Someone who cannot be swayed by pressure. Someone who cannot be controlled by approval. Someone who moves like a force rather than a follower. You become rare. You become powerful. You become yourself. There is a moment in your evolution when silence becomes your first language and explanation becomes your last resort. You begin to understand that those who deserve your truth rarely need it spoken. They recognize who you are by the way you move, not the way you justify. And those who demand explanations are often the ones who have already decided not to understand you. They only want your words so they can twist them into anchors that keep you in place. When you stop explaining, you stop handing people those anchors. You begin to see that the people who truly respect you recognize your decisions without dissecting them. They trust your spirit, not your speeches. They trust the solidity behind your eyes, not the length of your explanations. When you stop explaining, the world reveals itself. The loyal remain. The insecure fall away. The manipulators panic. The weak grow uncomfortable. Only the strong survive in your orbit. Because strength recognizes strength without needing translation. There is something terrifying about a person who no longer needs to be understood. It means they have stepped out of the world's emotional economy. They are no longer buying validation. They are no longer selling self-justification. They are no longer participating in the endless trading of excuses and explanations. They have separated themselves from the marketplace of approval. And when you step out of that marketplace, you stop being a product. You become a presence. People start to treat you differently. They begin watching you the way people watch a storm approaching. Not because you are destructive, but because you are undeniable. There is a weight to your silence, a gravity to your restraint, a depth to your stillness. They feel it before you speak a word. That is the moment your power begins to crystallize. When people feel you before they understand you. When your silence communicates more than your explanations ever could. You begin living on a different frequency. You are not rushing to clarify. You are not scrambling to fix others' misunderstandings. You are not performing emotional gymnastics to stay likable. You are not begging to be seen. You are not trying to soothe the discomfort of those who are threatened by your growth. You walk, you act, you decide, you move on, and those who cannot handle that pace will fall behind. Schopenhauer said that intelligent people suffer because they see too much, feel too deeply, and analyze too clearly. They recognize the futility of explaining themselves to those who do not think on the same level. They realize that some minds lack the architecture to understand certain souls. And once you realize that, you stop wasting your wisdom on those who have no intention of using it. When you stop explaining yourself, something powerful happens inside you. Your mind quiets. Your anxiety dissolves. Your decisions sharpen. You stop replaying conversations in your head. You stop wondering what people think. You stop rehearsing what you should have said. You stop apologizing in your imagination. You begin to trust your own judgment. You begin to feel sovereign in your own life. You begin to understand that the clarity you sought from others was a sign that you did not yet trust yourself. And that is the core of all explanations. They are not about the listener. They are about your uncertainty, your desire to be validated, your wish to be accepted, your fear of being judged. But once you build self-trust, explanations die naturally. There is no longer anything to defend, no longer anything to justify, no longer anything to prove. You simply are. Shakespeare once wrote that many wear masks to hide their weaknesses, but silence is a mask that reveals your strength. When you no longer explain yourself, you force people to see who you are without decoration. You force them to confront the truth that you will not shrink to be understood. And that truth is intimidating. Most people survive through social approval. They derive their identity from feedback. They need praise to feel valuable. They need reassurance to feel stable. They need agreement to feel confident. They need understanding to feel grounded. But when you stop needing those things, you become unpredictable in the best way. You become someone who cannot be controlled through emotional pressure. You become someone who cannot be guilted into compliance. You become someone who cannot be manipulated through silence or anger or confusion. You become someone whose value comes from within, not from the shifting tides of public opinion. People begin to see you differently. They hesitate before approaching you. They choose their words carefully. They speak with more respect. They watch their tone. They sense that you are no longer here to please anyone. You are here to move. You are here to rise. You are here to act. And if someone wishes to remain in your life, they must adjust to your altitude. This is why stillness is feared. This is why silence is feared. This is why boundaries are feared. Because all three represent self-ownership. And self-ownership is the rarest form of power. Marcus Aurelius lived as an emperor, yet he wrote like a monk. He understood the difficulty of leading without being swallowed by opinions. He refused to explain his decisions to the crowd. He refused to justify his integrity. He refused to let public noise dictate internal truth. And that is why history remembers him not as a ruler, but as a force. When you stop explaining yourself, you begin to walk in that same lineage. You become someone whose certainty is quiet, someone whose presence is grounding, someone whose decisions are final, someone who does not bow to the emotional weather of those who cannot rule themselves. You stop being reactive. You stop being defensive. You stop being apologetic. You stop being accessible to those who drain your energy. You stop being emotionally affordable. You stop being someone who is easy to read. You become elusive. You become enigmatic. You become respected. You become feared in a sacred way. Not because you intimidate others through aggression, but because you intimidate them through self-command. Most people cannot imagine living without explaining themselves. They cannot imagine walking away without a speech. They cannot imagine making a decision without justification. They cannot imagine maintaining a boundary without a long emotional preface. Because they are used to giving away the one thing they should have protected most, their inner authority. When you stop explaining yourself, you reclaim that authority. And what is authority? It is self-trust. It is internal solidity. It is emotional independence. It is the ability to move without permission. That kind of person is rare, and rarity creates value. This is why when you stop explaining, you do not lose people. You filter them. You separate the real from the fragile, the genuine from the curious, the loyal from the needy, the strong from the parasitic. You begin to see who deserves your presence. You begin to see who never deserved your explanations. And for the first time, you see yourself clearly. There is a point in your evolution when you realize that every explanation you gave in the past was not for clarity, but for survival. You explained yourself because you feared losing people. You explained yourself because you feared being misunderstood. You explained yourself because you feared being alone with your own conviction. You explained yourself because you had not yet met the version of you who does not flinch at being doubted. But that version exists. That version is rising. That version no longer negotiates identity. The moment you stop explaining yourself is the moment you step into your final form. Not perfect, not arrogant, not cold, just sovereign, whole, complete. A person who does not need permission to exist as they are. When you stop explaining, you begin to speak differently. Your voice is calmer. Your sentences are shorter. Your decisions are sharper. You no longer soften your truth with disclaimers. You no longer dilute your boundaries to spare feelings. You no longer offer essays to justify your choices. You say less, and yet somehow you communicate more. People feel something in you they cannot name. A density, a certainty, a grounded presence that cannot be swayed by opinion. You begin to sit in your own silence like a throne, and silence becomes your armor. This is when life begins to rearrange. Doors open that were previously shut. Opportunities appear that once ignored you. People treat you with a respect they never gave you before. Not because you demanded it, but because you stopped begging for it. There is a kind of magnetism that comes from self-containment. A gravity that pulls respect toward you and pushes nonsense away. You no longer chase. You attract. You no longer explain. You embody. You no longer argue. You observe. You no longer fight to be understood. You rest in the power of knowing. This shift is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is not public. It is internal. It is private. It is sacred. It is the slow, quiet realization that you do not owe anyone access to your mind, that your reasons are yours, that your intuition does not need external approval, that your boundaries do not need to be defended like fragile glass. You begin to understand why Epictetus said that freedom is found not in what you can explain, but in what you can refuse, and refusal becomes an art. You refuse arguments. You refuse guilt. You refuse overthinking. You refuse emotional labor for people who would never return it. And with every refusal, you rise. When you stop explaining yourself, you take back something that was stolen from you early in life. Your right to be misunderstood. A right you did not know you possessed. A right they told you was dangerous. A right they punished you for exercising. They made misunderstanding feel like failure. But in truth, misunderstanding is freedom. Because when someone misunderstands you and you feel no need to correct them, you have won. You have freed yourself from the tyranny of perception. You have freed yourself from emotional slavery. You have freed yourself from the mental cage of performing for acceptance. They misunderstand you, and you simply continue walking. They assume things about you, and you do not flinch. They twist your silence into stories, and you let them talk. This is power. This is evolution. This is liberation. Most people cannot live like this. They are trapped in the psychological addiction to being seen in the right light. They crave image management. They need to be perceived correctly. They panic at the thought of being wrongly judged. They run from rumors. They chase approval. They drown in the endless need for clarity. But those who rise to high levels of personal power understand a deeper truth. People will judge you anyway. People will misunderstand you anyway. People will invent their own narrative anyway. People will fill in the blanks of your silence with their own insecurities. So why explain? Let them imagine. Let them guess. Let them wonder. Let them talk. Your job is not to control the story in their minds. Your job is to control the story in your own. The less you explain, the more they project. The more they project, the more they reveal themselves. And the more they reveal themselves, the more clearly you see who is worth keeping. This is the hidden advantage of silence. It exposes everything. People who once pretended to support you suddenly show irritation when you stop performing for them. People who once smiled to your face now reveal envy when your silence forced them to confront their own voices. People who once treated you casually now treat you carefully because the absence of explanations makes them realize they never truly understood you. You become a mystery, and mysteries are respected. There is something deeply threatening about someone who no longer rushes to apologize. Someone who no longer races to clarify. Someone who no longer feels guilty for having needs, boundaries, or ambitions. Someone who simply decides and moves. Stillness is a kind of violence in a world addicted to noise. Your silence disrupts their comfort. Your silence ruins their control. Your silence ends their manipulation. Your silence breaks the chains they wrapped around your insecurities. When you stop explaining, you remove the very tools people use to keep you manageable. They can no longer rely on your emotional transparency. They can no longer guilt you using your empathy. They can no longer predict your reactions. They can no longer pull you back into old roles. You become unreadable, and unreadable people are uncontrollable. This is why your evolution scares them. Not because you changed, but because their influence over you faded. They relied on your explanations because explanations reveal fear. Explanations reveal doubt. Explanations reveal emotional vulnerability. Explanations reveal a desire to please. Explanations reveal the parts of you that were still seeking approval. When you stop explaining, you reveal nothing. And the less you reveal, the more others reveal themselves. People show their loyalty when you stop giving them reassurance. People show their respect when you stop giving them excuses. People show their character when you stop giving them explanations. This is why the most powerful individuals in history spoke in decisions, not essays. They acted with certainty and let the world interpret their silence as it wished. Some called them arrogant. Some called them mysterious. Some called them dangerous. But one thing was consistent across every interpretation. They were respected. Because the world respects what it cannot easily access, and it fears what it cannot control. Your silence becomes your shield. Your decisiveness becomes your sword. Your detachment becomes your crown. You rise not because you fight harder, but because you justify less. This is how kings are made. This is how legends are shaped. This is how empires of the self are built. You stop explaining. You start living. You begin becoming. There comes a turning point in your evolution when you realize that explaining yourself was never about clarity. It was about fear. Fear of being abandoned. Fear of being judged. Fear of being alone. Fear of being labeled something you are not. Fear of losing the approval you once depended on to feel real. But the moment you outgrow that fear, something extraordinary happens. A door opens inside you. A door that was locked your entire life. A door you never knew you had the key to. Behind that door is the version of you who does not negotiate identity, who does not dilute expression, who does not fear being misunderstood, who does not apologize for existing outside the limitations others designed for you. This is the version of you that was waiting for you to choose yourself, waiting for you to stop explaining, waiting for you to finally step into the power of being unapologetically whole. Because explanations are a tax you pay when you don't yet believe you have the right to be yourself. Once you realize you do, the tax ends. You begin to feel something unfamiliar at first. A new internal silence that does not feel empty, but full, heavy, grounded. It feels like coming home to a place you have never been. This silence is not weakness. It is mastery. It is self-command. You choose your words carefully now. You no longer speak to convince. You no longer argue to win. You no longer explain to soothe. You speak when your spirit chooses to speak, not when your insecurity urges you to. And that is why your voice suddenly carries more weight than it ever did before. People lean in when you talk. People pause before responding. People adjust their tone. People feel the shift before they understand it. You are no longer a participant in the emotional economy of others. You are the currency. You set the terms. The world becomes quieter. Not because there is less noise, but because the noise no longer owns you. You begin noticing things you couldn't see before. How people try to pull explanations out of you to keep you small. How they poke at your silence to test your resolve. How they ask questions they don't deserve answers to. How they wait for your justification so they can weaponize it later. But you no longer give them the ammunition. This is why your evolution frustrates people. They relied on your explanations to define you. They relied on your explanations to control you. They relied on your explanations to predict you. They relied on your explanations to feel superior to you. When the explanations stop, their power dissolves. And your power finally rises. This is when you realize something profound. You never owed anyone an explanation. You only believed you did. Your decisions do not need permission. Your boundaries do not need apologies. Your path does not need validation. Your intuition does not need an audience. Your inner world does not need external confirmation. The moment you stop explaining, you reclaim your life. You begin living not for approval, but for alignment. Not for acceptance, but for authenticity. Not for applause, but for purpose. Not for others' comfort, but for your own clarity. You become someone who walks away from disrespect without a lecture. Someone who removes themselves from noise without announcement. Someone who lets people misunderstand and keeps moving. Someone who knows that silence is sometimes the loudest truth, This is what makes you dangerous. Not in a violent way, not in a cruel way, but in a sovereign way. You are dangerous because you cannot be provoked. Dangerous because you cannot be guilted. Dangerous because you cannot be manipulated. Dangerous because you cannot be emotionally accessed by those who have not earned the privilege. You become unavailable to chaos, unavailable to drama, unavailable to draining conversations, unavailable to situations that dilute your spirit. Your time becomes sacred. Your peace becomes non-negotiable. Your energy becomes curated, and your silence becomes your throne. There is a unique intensity that surrounds someone who no longer explains themselves. An aura that says, I know who I am, and I do not need you to confirm it. An energy that says my decisions are final, and your approval is irrelevant. A presence that says, I am not here to please you, I am here to evolve. People feel this energy before you utter a sentence. It commands respect. It demands boundaries. It shifts dynamics. It recalibrates relationships. Some will fear this version of you. Some will envy it. Some will retreat from it. Some will attack it. But the right ones will rise to meet it. The right ones will respect your silence. The right ones will support your boundaries. The right ones will stand beside your decisions. The right ones will not demand explanations because they trust your mind. And this is the deepest reward of no longer explaining yourself. Your circle becomes smaller, but it becomes unbreakable. You begin to see the true shape of your life. You begin to see which connections were genuine. You begin to see which relationships were performative. You begin to see who loved you, and who loved the version of you that explained everything. You see yourself with unfiltered clarity. You see that the world does not grant freedom. The world only responds to the freedom you claim. You stop arguing with the past. You stop negotiating with the present. You stop apologizing to the future. You move. You rise. You transform. This is the moment you realize that freedom is not found in convincing others. Freedom is found in becoming someone who no longer needs to. You become a storm without thunder, a fire without smoke, a leader without noise, a presence without explanation. The world starts to whisper your name in rooms you have never walked into. People who once dismissed you now study your silence. People who once underestimated you now fear your detachment. People who once ignored you now sense the magnitude of your absence. This is the paradox of power. The less you explain, the more they feel you. The less you justify, the more they respect you. The less you speak, the more they listen. The less available you are, the more valuable you become. And the day you fully internalize this truth is the day your life changes forever. You stop explaining, you start becoming. And once you become yourself without permission, you become unstoppable. That is the power. That is the danger. That is the freedom. And that is the version of you the world was never prepared to face.